Good morning. Welcome to Table Rock State Park. I'm Scott Stiganga. I'm the interpretive naturalist here. And we're at the beginning of our nature center where all the trails start. And what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about the forest ecology of this area of the mountains. So come along and join us and we'll see what's out there today. So here we're at the Nature Center deck at Table Rock State Park. We've got Parrot Creek flowing by, and we're going to be talking about the forest ecology up here at the park. Now, Table Rock exists along the Blue Ridge Escarpment, which basically runs down a lot of Highway 11, and that is a sheer drop off of elevation from the top of the mountain ridges here down towards the Piedmont. And so we have a lot of biodiversity in the mountains here, plants and animals. And it all depends upon the geology of the area, which affects your temperature, your sunlight, the soil pH, drainage. So a lot of those factors go into determining the type of habitats. We've got a big diversity because Table Rock Mountain, from this point, arises 2,000 feet in elevation, and so you get a lot of changes along the way, and it determines a lot what lives here. The forest ecology, what does that involve actually? Well, the ecology of this forest is the interaction, the environment, the ecosystem, is the interaction between a lot of living things and non-living things. It takes both of those factors in a habitat to have a functioning ecosystem. And what we like to study here is the forest ecosystem. We've got over 3,000 acres here. A lot of the trails go through these areas, and we actually have a school program, Discover Carolina. It's based on the standards for education, and we gear it towards 5th grade. So we offer a Discover Carolina program in forest ecology. So I mentioned living and non-living parts of the ecosystem. The non-living part is called the abiotic factors. The living, of course, is the biotic factors. A lot of people think about the living parts of the habitat because that's most exciting. Those are the things you want to go out and see. But if it wasn't for the abiotic factors, you wouldn't have an ecosystem. And some of the important ones I can point out right here. One of the abiotic factors is, of course, water. You've got this drainage coming off the escarpment up on Table Rock Mountain and Pinnacle Mountain, and all these small streams drain off down into the basin here, the drainage basin, which is from the Table Rock watershed. We've got a watershed on the other side of the ridge line of Table Rock, and we also have a drainage that comes down into this side of the mountain, which goes into the Illinois River. Another abiotic factor, real important, of course, is rocks, the geology. You see rock formations everywhere. There's a lot of rock below the surface that you never see, of course, which makes up our mountain. But what you do see determines how the stream drains off the mountain, provides shelter and habitat. Very important for wildlife and plants as well, because the minerals of these rocks help create the soil, and certain aspects of the soil are important for plant life as well. So everything is interlinked, of course, plants, animals, and the abiotic factors. So here we are. We came out in the forest a little ways out on the trail, and surrounded by a lot of neat things to see and hear. So I want to ask you a question. When you look out through the forest, what color do you see the most of? That's pretty easy to answer. Of course, it's green. You see green everywhere, from the lowest point along in the forest down to the ground, and it's way up high and everywhere in between. And if you look around, do you see any animals? Now, there's some out there, I guarantee you, but they're not always active where you can see them. A lot of them are small and hiding. But when you just look around, you see in plants, green plants everywhere. And they're the ones that produce the food. They're getting the sunlight and taking in the water and the carbon dioxide to make their own food. And they're producing a lot of necessity for animals out in this forest. Primarily, you do see a lot of green, and it's pretty much everywhere. Maybe not quite as much in the wintertime, but anytime you come out here, no matter what season, you are going to see mostly green as far as colors go. The animals, of course, are the consumers. They're the ones that feed on these plants or feed on other animals. Some are herbivores, they eat only plants. Some animals are carnivores, they eat only other animals. And some are omnivores, which they'll eat plants and animals, sort of like we are. We like our salads, we like our hamburgers, we eat both. But no matter what the animals are eating, it all goes back. The foundation of our food pyramid is the plant life. That's what is the basic foundation to support everything above it as far as animals are concerned. All right, so here we are out in this beautiful forest, and we're going to be talking about the ecosystem having habitat layers. I want you to stop and think for a minute about a big city. If you've ever been to Atlanta or Charlotte or any other large city in our country, you'll notice they've got some pretty tall buildings. Not every building is low to the ground. Some of them are very tall. They've got very many stories, and you may wonder, if you stop to think about that, why is that? Well, in a big city, space is a premium, and instead of spreading everybody out flat along the ground for miles and miles, they sort of stack people up in these tall buildings. Some are apartments, a lot of them are buildings where they go to work in, but buildings get pretty tall in the city, and that way you don't have to spread out so much. And if you kind of think as a comparison, you get out in the forest, not all the animals are going to be on the ground. That would be a lot of competition between them. Some like to have their little niche a little bit higher up. And we're going to start at the ground level, the foundation which supports all of the forest. It's called the forest floor. Pretty simple name. We know what a floor is. And if you look out in the forest, it's what's at the very bottom level of the ground. And I just reach down here, and this is what you're looking at in the forest floor. It contains a lot of different things. None of them are green, you'll notice, because that's a little bit different layer. I'm talking about the basic material that supports everything else. And this is a lot of dead stuff. Leaves, branches, twigs, old seeds. We even got logs are part of the forest floor. They're pretty big, but they're part of that. And why don't you think every year, of course, we have the leaves falling off the trees. Why aren't these leaves way over our head by now? Because there's a lot of trees out here and a lot of leaves come down, and they should be getting deeper and deeper, but they don't. Well, the forest is good at recycling. It takes care of things. And so all of these dead materials, whether it's an animal or a plant, a lot of it gets decomposed back into the soil, providing a rich nutrient base for plant roots to grow. Now, who does the decomposing job? Well, I call it the FBI. Now, that's not detectives, that's decomposers. The F stands for fungus. And anytime you see a mushroom or a fungus on a tree trunk or a log, it's doing that recycling. It's decomposing this organic material that the tree doesn't need anymore because it's dead. So it's breaking that down to become soil. And so we've got some fungus right here. These look like turkey tails because they look like a fanned out tail of a turkey. And they're on this log taking care of their job of decomposing. That's the F part of the FBI. The B is the stuff organisms you don't see much unless you get a real close-up view in a microscope. Bacteria, it's everywhere. If your trash stinks, blame it on bacteria. That's what's doing that work in there to break that stuff down. So there's bacteria in the soil, that's helping to break it down. And the I stands for invertebrates, which can include earthworms, millipedes, termites, ants, any small invertebrate that's in that soil working on decomposing, breaking this stuff down. So those three work together and they take care of the recycling job in the forest, and they do a great job of it. So we just looked at the forest floor as our foundation level of our habitat layers out in the forest, and most animals that live in the forest floor are the smaller things, insects, invertebrates. I mean, you'll get snakes, box turtles, certain mammals, voles, moles, those type of things. But we're going to go up slightly, just a little bit, to the next level. That's called the herbaceous level. That's where you have a lot of smaller growing plants. That includes ferns, wildflowers, grasses, a lot of small herbaceous type plants that you'll find in the forest. I can point out a couple to you that we have real common here in this part of the state up in the mountains. This is a Christmas fern. You notice a little leaflet here that shows, some say it resembles the stocking hanging at the fireplace, or if you turn it, you can kind of see us make it out of Santa's sleigh out of it. But anyway, it's called Christmas fern. It is evergreen, stays green all the year. As do these little plants down here. This is partridge berry. These small round ground cover. A lot of the leaves are darker. They produce a red berry in the summer, and very common ground cover. So anything like that, if we were earlier in the spring, you'd have a lot more wildflowers to see. We have got wild iris, and there's just a lot of different violets, a lot of different wildflowers in the springtime. But the herbaceous level of the forest covers the lower areas, and it can be quite thick. You can have a thick patch of ferns or other herbaceous plants that provide a good ground cover. It helps to keep the soil intact from erosion. And, a lot of root mass in some of these plants. Provides shelter, provides egg laying for insects, provides food for grazers, a lot of different things for different animals out in the forest. And so the herbaceous layer is one step up from the forest floor, and usually that's what attracts us the most because it's down by our level, and since it blooms a lot, it also attracts things that we like to see: butterflies, hummingbirds, different types of beetles, bees. A lot of different things are attracted as pollinators to the herbaceous level. So that layer is pretty important because pollinators are an important part of the ecosystem. All right, we're ready to take another step up the levels of the forest. We've had the forest floor, we've had the herbaceous layer, now we're going up to the shrub layer. That layer can get taller than us as humans, so we're starting to rise up here in the forest. But the shrub layer is sort of the middle layer. We've got a couple layers after that, but one of the most common shrubs we have out in this forest is the rhododendron. And this is the rhododendron maxima. Has the large, rosebay rhododendron has the large, long leaves. And they're real common along the slopes here in the mountains, especially down in these stream valleys. And they produce a real thick network on these slopes out here that can get very thick, hard to get through, provide great shelter. Small birds, small animals, birds like the hooded warbler nest in shrubs, so it's a good protection for them. If you've got a small bird flying along and there's a hawk chasing it, diving into these thick shrubs is one way to get away from that predator. And we're getting into early summer now, and this rhododendron will be blooming. It's a little bit early yet, but you can see the large buds on there, which will be producing basically mostly a white flower. And there's another rhododendron in the forest here, which blooms a little bit earlier than this, called the rhododendron minus. It has a purplish pink flower. Another shrub that you'll see out here is sweet shrub. It is done blooming. It has like a dark maroon flower on it. Smells really good. The bark of this shrub smells awesome as well, real pungent. What's neat about this particular shrub, when the flower is pollinated, it produces a little shriveled up seed pod, and it's pretty good size, and it hangs on there into the fall and winter. And there's a mouse out here called the golden mouse. It loves to climb up bushes and trees, and it'll climb up and chew holes in that seed pod and get the seeds out of the sweet shrub. So there's a good relationship between plant and animal out here. That's sweet shrub. Here's a neat one that people like to see. It's called strawberry bush or hearts arbustum. And the stem of this little shrub is green year round, so when the leaves are gone, you can identify it. This time of the year, the flower's already been pollinated and this little seed pod is starting to develop. It's green now, but it'll get a little bit larger than that, about 3 times as big as that. It'll be a dark red, and when it pops open in the fall, it'll have bright orange seeds in it. And that's like a heart breaking open because of the color and so forth. But there's a lot of different shrubs out here. Those are just a few that are most often seen. All right, we're getting closer to the top. The next layer is the understory layer, and that fills the gap between the shrubs and the highest trees in the forest, which can be quite a big space. Our understory trees out here are ones that grow maybe 30, 40, sometimes 50 feet, but they don't get up in the 70, 80 feet height. Our common ones are the flowering dogwood, American holly, and the sourwood tree. We've got a dogwood right here. You see, it's not a very large tree. They don't get a huge trunk. They don't grow incredibly tall, but they do produce some great food for wildlife, especially in the fall. The flowers we enjoy in the spring, in April, they produce this red berry by the beginning of fall, and squirrels and a lot of migrating songbirds relish the berries of the dogwood. Right behind it, you see this sort of a slanty tree there. That's real common posture of the sourwood tree. They don't grow straight very often out in the forest. The true understory trees are the ones that are limited in their height. And those 3 are pretty well known and favorites. The dogwood, the holly, and the sourwood. Well, here we are, one of the forest giants, which is the source of our highest level out here in the woods. It's the canopy level, habitat level. And that's the big umbrella over the whole forest. And that's what gives us all our shade. Provides a lot of leaves for recycling in the forest floor. And the higher you get on these levels, the more limited you are of what can live there. Compared to the forest floor, there's probably more than you think lives in these canopy trees. But a lot of them are small. Anything that can fly or climb can get up in the canopy tree. So you've got everything from all types of insects that'll use this for food and shelter and laying eggs. And you also have the largest animal in the forest that can get up pretty high if it wants to, the black bear. They're great climbers. They can get up there quite a ways if they're trying to escape danger or trying to get grapes or whatever they find good to eat up there. But we have an oak hickory forest here at Table Rock, and that's your more mature trees that grow up, especially up in the higher slopes. A lot of white oak, red oak, and your mockernut hickory. And down here in the stream valleys, a lot of your canopy trees are the eastern hemlock and the American beech tree. And you also have tulip poplar and a few others. But the canopy trees are the tallest trees out in the woods, provide a lot of shelter, provide a lot of food. A lot of mast food comes from these, for your acorns, your hickory nuts. The canopy is a special layer that makes it comfortable walking out in the forest because it provides the shade. And it also shades the forest floor, so certain species that flower have to flower earlier in the year before that canopy leaf sets in. So, and then when these big boys come down, then you start the process over. It becomes forest floor when this thing falls from a storm. or it just dies and tips over. Then you've got the recycling with the FBI again, and the nutrients from the logs will furnish growth for other plants that take its place. So we've got that life cycle always going on out here. But now everything out here in the forest is linked together in some way. We've touched on a few things, but there's a lot of food webs, a lot of things going on in any season of the year. It's just more obvious in the spring and the fall, and in the summer to some extent. But always something going on, changing with the plants and animals. This vibrant ecosystem, the life cycle that goes on out here. And those are just some of the samples we looked at as far as the layers of the forest. And you're not going to find box turtles and white-tailed deer up there, but you will find bats, owls, cicadas, the insect, and a lot of songbirds, squirrels, and even black bears. So there's a lot of things utilize the canopy.